You've heard of the Holocaust under Hitler, but have you ever heard of the one orchestrated by Stalin? A genocide so vast it claimed millions of lives and was buried under decades of propaganda, lies, and fear. This is the story of the Holodomor Stalin-esque war in Ukraine, and how history almost forgot an atrocity worse than fiction. In the early 1930s, the Soviet Union was undergoing rapid transformation. Joseph Stalin, determined to turn the USSR into a global industrial power, launched a brutal campaign of forced collectivization. Peasants were stripped of their land, private farms were outlawed, grain was seized by the state, often leaving villagers with nothing, not even enough to survive the winter. This wasn't just economic policy, it was punishment. Resistance was met with violence. Entire villages were blacklisted, cut off from supplies, and left to die. In Ukraine, the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, the consequences were catastrophic. Between 1932 and 1933, a man-made famine swept the region. The harvest was decent, but the food was taken. Soviet soldiers guarded the fields and the roads. Anyone caught hiding grain was shot. Parents watched their children starve. People ate grass, tree bark, even their own pets. In the most desperate places, there were reports of cannibalism. The world knew something was wrong. Journalists like Gareth Jones tried to report the truth, but were silenced, discredited, or ignored. The New York Times Moscow correspondent Walter Duranty downplayed the famine, even winning a Pulitzer Prize while parroting Stalin's lies. Estimates vary, but historians agree. At least 3 to 4 million people died. Some say the number was closer to 7 million. Stalin's regime didn't just ignore the deaths, it denied them. Soviet records were falsified, maps were redrawn. Survivors were threatened into silence. Officially, the famine didn't exist. Speaking about it meant arrest, exile, or worse, the goal: to crush Ukrainian nationalism, break the will of the people, and erase any hope of independence. This wasn't a failure of policy, it was deliberate. Scholars today call it genocide, targeting an ethnic group for destruction, using starvation as a weapon. Meanwhile, the international community looked away. The Soviet Union was gaining diplomatic recognition. Western leaders were eager to avoid conflict and to profit from trade. Only decades later, after the fall of the USSR, did the full horror of the Holodomor begin to surface. Mass graves were found, survivor testimonies emerged, secret archives were opened. Ukraine declared the famine a genocide in 2006. Over 20 countries now officially recognize it as such, but others still refuse to use that word for political reasons or out of fear of angering Russia. To this day, denial persists. Propaganda still clouds the truth, and Russia continues to deny that the famine was targeted, calling it a broader Soviet tragedy, not a Ukrainian one. Yet, the evidence is clear. The Holodomor was a state-orchestrated extermination and one of the most horrific crimes of the 20th century. Why does this matter today? Because history repeats itself, especially when it's buried. The Holodomor was not just about hunger, it was about erasing a people, silencing a culture, and rewriting history with blood. Remembering it is an act of resistance. Telling the truth is a form of justice. And if we forget the forgotten Holocaust, we risk allowing it or something like it to happen again. If this story moved you, don't let it stay buried. Share it. Talk about it. Demand that the truth be known. Subscribe for more real stories they never taught you in school. Because the past isn't gone, it's just waiting to be remembered.